Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Insight AppSAD webinar series. To start off, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways throughout Australia, paying respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to extend that welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guests who are joining us from around the country. I'm coming to you today from Meanjin or Brisbane on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and I'd like to acknowledge the ongoing impact that colonisation has on our First Nations Australians, including the disproportionate impact of substance use on their health and well-being. My name's Ben, I'm an educator here at Insight, and it's my pleasure to be introducing to you today our speaker, Professor Sharon Dawe. Sharon's been a clinical psychologist and academic for over 25 years. Her research focuses specifically on how addiction impacts parents and their children. She's a co-developer of the Parents Under Pressure program, which provides support to parents who have problematic substance use with the goal of improving outcomes for the family, especially children. Sharon's very passionate about supporting families living in adverse circumstances by supporting parents to manage difficult life situations. We're going to have time for questions following Sharon's presentation, so please make sure that you type any questions or queries you may have for her in the chat, and I'll ask them on your behalf at the end of her talk. So welcome, Sharon, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm just going to pause for a moment and just make sure that all of our technology is working. I've just moved on to slide 2. And has that worked, everybody? Can somebody just indicate?
It has.
It has. Super.
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ben, for inviting me along to an Insight seminar. I always enjoy speaking to the drug and alcohol field. It's sort of where I started a million years ago, back in Odyssey House and residential treatment facility. And over the years, I've spent a lot of time working in the drug and alcohol sector, sometimes full-time as a clinician and a lot of the time as a researcher and academic. So it's nice to touch base with my roots. So today I'm going to talk about the Parents Under Pressure program. I'm hoping that that it is fresh and new for many of you, although I have also given this talk on a couple of separate occasions in various forms. So hopefully there's something new for everybody if you have heard me speak before. Increasingly, I have been aware about the complexity of intergenerational histories. And for all of you working clinically, you will know that you don't have to dig very deep to find out that many of your clients have had pretty chaotic and complex lives themselves. And we're now talking, several generations of complexity. And that doesn't necessarily mean generation upon generation of substance abuse, but kind of adversity, displacement, for many of our First Nations people enduring racism, discrimination, the legacy of the stolen generation. For many people coming to Australia, there's the intergenerational problem of displacement and trauma, refugee status. And for many of the people that have lived in Australia across generations, we still have engagement in child protection. And, their kids do not do well by and large. And so there's something about this challenge of how do we move forward? What can we do as a sector that's going to start to change intergenerational patterns? And of course, there isn't any one single solution. But I guess for me at this point in time, trying to promote the idea that engagement with families, engagement with clients through a family lens is going to offer an option. Now, that can involve really minor things, such as having a fruit stand in a clinic, or having a play area, making your environment a little bit more child-friendly and child-focused, to actually having whole teams that are involved in doing family work. So in a way, the goal, I think, for our sector going forward is to kind of shift our lens from an individual focus to saying, even in a very, very small way, what can I do differently tomorrow that's going to make my practice a little bit more family inclusive? And so really that's what I would like to ask all of you to take away from this webinar today, just to say, if I were to do one small thing differently that was to shift my lens to be more family focused, what could that be? So the series of slides that I'm going to go through are going to be very familiar to you all. So you will see there's, we start off with the challenge of complex families who live in chaos and a sense of kind of powerlessness, both on the part of the families and part of the practitioner. And so if we're going to take a family-focused lens, how do we think about parenting programs that could support families that live in chaos? And, I grew up in the 90s as a clinical psychologist, and in the 90s we had a manual for everything, and you started at the beginning and you went through to the very end. And I don't know if any of you in the room have ever looked at the original motivational interviewing manual that was part of the famous American study of motivational interviewing, relapse prevention, and abstinence-oriented treatment. But gosh, it was prescriptive. It was really, really prescriptive, down to the sentence, the comma, the next phrase, etc. And of course, over the years, we've become far less prescriptive. And really where we've got to with the PUP program is that we need something that's individually tailored and it's flexible. But there's also, I think, an enduring problem with what I call messy eclecticism. And so messy eclecticism occurs when you're doing a wee bit of this and a wee bit of that, and somehow it doesn't quite hang together. So yes, we need to be individually tailored and flexible, but underneath we need a framework, a theoretical framework that's going to give sense and coherence to our work. And this really is a place that Paul and I moved to fairly early on in the development of the PUP program when we realized that a manualized structured treatment was not going to be a reasonable or sensible approach for the families that we were working with. So the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk you through our theoretical framework. So the idea with the PUP program is that you learn the framework, you learn the theoretical influences on the framework, and you work out how you can, in a sense, fit the family's story, the family's narrative into this particular framework. I spend a lot of time in the UK, and I would like you all to think about a row of terraced houses, not something that's terribly common here in Brisbane, but if you think about that row of terraced houses, the terraced houses from the outside look the same. Structurally, they're identical. They all have the same foundations and the same roof, and they all have the same structural walls. So there's a structural integrity to this set of terraced houses. But when you walk into the terraced houses, each one is decorated a little differently. And so the idea with the PUP program is learn the framework. This is your foundation. This is your structural integrity. And following this, you think about what skills do I bring to my work? What experiences have I had that I can bring to my work? And how do I decorate my PUP house? So let's have a look at the structural framework around our PUP house. First and foremost, we put children center. So the ultimate goal of the PUP program is to help kids be the best that they can be. And that is a goal that is almost universally shared by parents. You're not going to get any resistance when you say, let's work together to help your kids be the best that they can be. And so it's a way of engaging parents, and it's a way of centering your own work and your own focus. And so in order for kids to be the best that they can be, we need to know what our starting point is. And so there you see a list of areas of interest that we're concerned about or information we want to find out. So yes, we do want to know that our little 5-year-old has significant behavior problems. His attention and concentration is very poor. He's very aggressive. He hits children and there's when he hasn't been particularly provoked or with minor provocation. But we also want to know that he's the best runner or the fastest runner in the class. We also want to know that actually, despite these problems, he has a good group of little friends that he plays with at lunchtime. Yes, I'm happy to, I'll send you a PDF afterwards, so don't worry, Grace, it'll all work. So yeah, here we've got our child developmental outcomes. So we want to understand where our little 5-year-old is placed in his family, in his neighborhood, in his network. And we want to know about his gross motor and fine motor skills, his language development. All of these things are central. And the extent to which you find find out about these things will depend a little bit on your context. You might have access to teachers, you might have access to wider family, or you might just be talking to mum. Regardless, it's the place, it's the starting point. But then the next thing that you want to do, sorry, let me just move my slide on, is to think about what are the components of this little boy's life that is going to give him the best chance of success. And actually finding out who cares about him, who helps him feel loved and safe, is absolutely key to this little boy's developmental outcome. There's enormous amount of research from children about children growing up in areas of conflict, of military conflict, and children growing up in families where there's been somebody who was a Holocaust victim. We've got studies about children growing up in orphanages, in extreme deprivation. Across all of this literature, when you zoom back and think about what is it that distinguishes those kids who kind of show resilience, who manage to do okay, it's the children who have had somebody who helps them feel loved and safe. And so really key to our program is to find out, is there somebody there? And if there isn't, and if there is, to celebrate that, to enhance it, to help that relationship be central and strong in this little one's life. And if there isn't, then maybe this is an area of focus. Maybe this is a situation where somewhere along the way, this parent has forgotten how much they loved their baby and feel bogged down by hostility and a whole range of other complex emotions. And so for that particular person, you know, a lot of your work will be around helping that person, that carer, reconnect with their child. I'm going to show you a little video. It's a very cute video, and many of you will have seen it. Perhaps it did its rounds on YouTube. But the thing I love about this little snippet of video is that in a minute and a half, it tells an enormously important and rich story. So let me just play it for you.
They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Okay, so that became an overnight sensation and did the rounds of Facebook, etc., etc. I'm hoping that all of you have got your little cup of tea and are just having a little moment where you're feeling warm inside and a little smile on your face, because there was something truly charming about and natural about that interaction. If we were to put on our pup lens, we can actually say more than it was just charming and lovely and cute. We can actually analyze and say, what was it that was so important about that interaction? And one of the things about the pup program is that we provide our practitioners with a language for describing what it is that they're seeing when they're looking at parent-child interactions. So here we draw from the concept of emotional availability. Many people slip into this idea of we've got to describe the attachment relationship. There are many problems, and I could spend an entire webinar on that alone, with the reliance on attachment classifications, quantification of it, etc. It's a difficult and complex area. The reason we chose to go with emotional availability is that it describes the moment-to-moment interaction, and it provides you with a structure for thinking about how you describe emotional availability. And so here what we're thinking about really is sensitivity. The parent genuinely enjoying the company of the child, physical contact is appropriate to the situation. And if we think about this little video clip that we just saw, it exuded warmth. And there was such a naturalness about him. The dad was really smiling. He was following the child's lead, the baby's lead. The distance was totally comfortable. You know, the dad didn't feel the need to reach over and pull the baby onto his knee. The baby didn't feel the need to crawl over to dad. They were just doing what they had been doing often, which was sitting on the sofa, hanging out. And dad was totally engaged and warm. And then we have this concept of structuring. What do we mean by structuring? We need, regardless of what stage of development your child is at, from birth all the way through to late teenage years, we need to structure their environment. We need to provide scaffolding that's going to help them move to the next level, if you like. And so here what we saw was some wonderful scaffolding around language development and socialization. So this is sometimes called the serve and return game that parents and very young children do. Somebody serves and then you return the ball, and then you serve and then you return it again. And what we saw beautifully played out here was the serve and return of social communication. But really the star of the show was the little boy. And he was the star of the show because he actually initiated much of this. He was the one who started the gesturing, and then the dad followed, and then he would babble and the dad would say words, and then he would babble again and do some more gesturing, and then dad would even follow his gesturing. So what you saw was a dad who was tuned into his child, who was sensitive to the child's cues, but a child who was extremely comfortable with playing this game, if you like, with dad. So we really need, and so this is like just a snippet of something that when you do your pup training, you'll spend hours and hours and hours watching videos of parent-child interaction and really learning how to observe in a way that's going to be really constructive to a parent. There are times when, in fact, your observation will lead you to say, this is a very insensitive caregiver with no structuring and a certain amount of hostility. That is not a judgment if it is based on clear observational principles. But what it does do is give you a way of thinking about what can you do to work therapeutically in this particular situation. How can you reduce the hostility? How can you increase the sensitivity? And what can you do about the structuring? So we move from a kind of place of saying he's a good parent or she's a good mum to actually something that's a much more sophisticated and therapeutically important way of thinking about the parent-child relationship. Likewise, we have our blue circle, parenting values and expectations. Parents are not often asked about what are their values and what would they like when their child is 15. How do you see, if we were to ask this dad, how do you see him when he's 15? And that question opens up a whole range of really important conversations that you can have with a carer. But we also need to have some routines. We need to have some monitoring. And parents need to have some understanding of what it is that they need to do. So here we've got our two inner circles, if you like, of our PUP program. The yellow circle reflecting an attachment, theoretical models of attachment and emotional availability. The upper circle reflecting parental knowledge. And to some extent, we can draw on behavioral parenting principles here. So getting the two inner circles, the yellow and the blue right, depends on the parent's capacity for emotion regulation. And this is something I'm going to come back to, because many of the families that you guys work with have caregivers who have not had their own opportunity to learn how to develop good emotion regulation. And so that becomes very challenging in the context of parenting. And so we need to have a program that focuses on supporting parents to develop emotion regulation so that they, in turn, can support their child's emotion regulation. So if we think back to that initial case that I was talking about with our little 5-year-old who's got poor attention concentration, who's aggressive, who has some in the school context, and all of that's potentially going to lead to really serious problems, we can start to say, you know, to his caregiver, what would you like him to be like at 15? And it's very likely that the caregiver will say, not like me. And then you unpack that a little bit more. And the caregiver may say things like, you know, I'd like him to have finished school. I'd like him to have had friends. And so then it can become a conversation of how can you help him develop a better emotion regulation so that he will stay in school and not get kicked out of grade 1. And so what you're doing is you're enlisting the support of the parent to engage in their own emotion regulation development in order for them to help their little 5-year-old be better regulated. So it's very much a co-regulation model, and a model where you're thinking about coaching parent to coach child. And therein, again, gets around a very complex problem around saying to somebody, you need to sort out yourself. And that may well be true. And there are ways that you can do that are going to engage that person through their desire for their child to be the best that they can be. We need children, we need connectedness to culture, connectedness to community, connection to family, connection to faith. This is more than social support. It's something around a meaningful and valued contribution that we all need to make in our lives. And so there is also something very important about helping people reconnect. And finally, there's an acknowledgement of the real world problems. So a family who's about to be made homeless, a parent who's not able to get the money for the school uniforms, or knows that the children are sleeping on mattresses and it's coming up for winter and it's going to be very cold, are not parents who are going to be able to sit down and talk to you about the ins and outs of their parenting experiences at that point in time. So there is something about having the flexibility to use real world problems as a therapeutic opportunity. rather than just to kind of separate out therapeutically and say, today I'm sorting out the housing office and tomorrow I'll do PUP. In fact, what you want to do is say, in sorting out the housing problems, one of the things we're going to focus on is helping you stay calm, where in fact you're using real world problems to help develop some self-regulation skills. So that's the first, 25 minutes. Sometimes I pause here to see if there are any questions that anybody would like to make in the chat. So if there are, I've got my chat here and Ben's also helping me. So
there might be some people who are typing. Thank you for putting that in. So I'm going to kind of sneak in with a question while other people are doing that, if that's okay. You mentioned this idea of using real world problems as a therapeutic opportunity, which I really love that idea. And I think it's something that as we kind of develop comes more easily. I was wondering, are you able to maybe talk a little bit more about that concept and whether there's any kind of practical strategies that you can recommend people kind of try, or where to start out if people are struggling?
Yeah. Well, let's take the case of our little 5-year-old. That's a real world problem. He's going to get kicked out of that primary school. He's already been suspended and that people are not putting up with him. It's a real world problem, you know. So how do we solve that real world problem? One of the ways that we can think about doing it is helping mum have some connection with the school. Now, why hasn't mum got some connection with the school? Because she doesn't like the teacher, because she thinks the teacher's going to judge her, because she doesn't leave the house, whatever it is. There's a real world problem there about how do we help that mum connect with the school to help solve the problem. And as soon as you've got engagement with a parent, with the school, all sorts of things open up. But a lot of these crisis situations with kids happen because the parent is so removed and the teacher feels so angry towards, it's sad, but you know, the teacher feels angry towards the parent, the teacher feels angry towards the child. They're not able to manage this child in the context of the classroom, and they don't see any solution in sight. So something as small as trying to finesse that. Other real world problems. So, you know, really it may be something as simple as going to the housing offices, and often an example I give because it was something that occurred, that happened with the case that I was dealing with many years ago. She had to go to the housing office. She'd been kicked out of the housing office because last time she went, she swore. And she swore because they'd lost her form for the 3rd time in a row. And she was really desperate and really stressed and then got escorted. So we went into the housing office yet again. And before we went into the housing office, think pink circle. So, okay, let's do a few slow, deep breaths. Let's think about what the goal is. The goal is to get a new flat because you love the kids and you want them to have somewhere safe to live. Yes. So in amongst all of this, what's going to happen, what's going to play out, maybe she's lost your form again, maybe we have to do it all. We have to hang on to, you love your kids and you want them to feel safe. So there again is, it's something bigger than just the immediate problem. And so you're doing some slow, deep breaths before you go in. You might even have a plan about if you start to get really angry, you step back, I'll step forward, and then I'll just do the next question. Is that a sort of useful example, Ben?
Yeah, I think so. It really is clear to me how it's helpful to have that map, because once you have the map, you can kind of use any situation to find out what parts are relevant and target those things. Yeah, thank you. I think I can't see any other things in the chat at the minute, but I'll keep collating and touch base with you later.
Okay, sure. So look, is PUP an evidence-based program? Look, we're just sneaking into, yes, strong evidence. It's usually 3 randomized controlled trials that tick the box for evidence-based. And all of these are available on our website if you wanted to download them and read them in detail. So the bottom line is that our primary outcome measure tends to be child abuse potential or involvement in statutory child protection. And across a range of different studies, we've actually found that fairly consistently, in fact. Is it cost effective? Well, we got some health economists back in 2015. It's really cost effective and this is the most conservative. The health economists were very lean with our data. They said at best you're going to get 1 in 5 cases improved and maltreatment prevented. So even with that 1 in 5, that's 20% of your cases. You are saving an enormous amount of money. So how does PUP work? This is the last maybe 10 minutes of my talk. For a really to the best of my knowledge, the PUP program is the only parenting program that explicitly includes a focus on parental emotion regulation. And our thinking through the entire development of the PUP program is that if you can help a parent to develop some emotion regulation skills, a lot else will follow. If you can get the pink circle right, you can support them to do the blue circle stuff, and you can help them rediscover their love and their caring for their child, and work with them on how you can make that turn that family environment around from kind of conflictual and hostile. So really fundamentally, there is something incredibly important about parental emotion regulation. So what we've done across 2 different studies is to take data and test out whether, in fact, our hunch, our belief is correct. So here is a paper that I published in Addiction in 21. It's open access. So if you're super keen to dig down and read it in all of its statistical glory, by all means do. But the bottom line is that parents were either given treatment as usual or PUP program. And for those parents in the PUP take the top line first. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor moving here, but anyway, parental emotion regulation improved. Child abuse potential improved. Now, both of those things are very gratifying to know from a program developer point of view, but really what's very interesting is what improved first? Or is there even any relationship or pattern here? And what we see in our green arrow is that for those parents in the PUP program, an improvement in parental emotion regulation was associated at time 2, so this is at 6 months, predicted a decrease in child abuse potential at 12 months. So what it's telling us is that the emotion regulation changed before the child abuse potential. So you can see that we tested various pathways, all of which were non-significant, and this being a significant one. So again, that's was a really helpful analysis, because my own clinical impression is that you've got to do something about parental emotion regulation to help have a flow-on effect. We did a similar sort of thing with a cohort study. This is 160 parents in the UK. And again, we've got parental psychopathology. This was the DAS, which many of you will be familiar with. And this was this idea of mindful parenting, which is kind of central to the PUP program. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, I haven't got green lines here yet. But what you see here is your DAS score at midpoint in treatment was associated with, as the DAS score went down, your mindful parenting score went up. So you've got a negative relationship there. So as people's DAS scores improved, we saw a greater capacity to engage in mindful parenting. So again, that's telling us something about the mechanism of change within the context of parenting. And so how do we do mindfulness in the PUP program? Again, sometimes we call it sneaky mindfulness. We don't, in the same way that we support parents to develop emotion regulation, we also, which is a slightly indirect route, we also introduce the idea of mindfulness through a slightly indirect route. So we don't do meditation and we spend a lot of time talking about mindfulness. What we try to do is get parents to slow down and just be fully present with their child. So, of course, the core to mindfulness principles is fully present in the moment. And so what we do is work with parents just to notice this little 5-year-old that we were talking about before, and notice that he's actually watching telly and he's being really quiet. And when you say hi to him, he smiled and he had a lovely smile. So you're really slowing down and getting parents to attend to and be mindful of the moments of joyful parenting. I was going to finish off now with showing you a short animation. So there's something critical about parental emotion regulation. And one of the agencies that we've worked with the better part of 8 years now is in Alice Springs. It's Central Australian Aboriginal Congress. And taking the POP program out to Central Australia was an interesting adventure, to say the least. And in the process, we learned a lot. And we also worked with the family support workers out there, Aboriginal family support workers, to adapt both our framework diagram, some of our resources, and to develop some animations. And we've got 3 animations. The first one is I Am Here, which tells the story of a little boy who needed to be noticed. So therein lies the yellow circle. We've got Just Breathe, telling the story of about a mum who needed to protect her child from anger. And then we've got I'm All Right, which is telling the story of a dad who became emotionally regulated. And I'm going to finish our talk today with playing you this little clip. This is just a photograph of our co-design process. So our wonderful director is sitting in the foreground there on a leather chair, Christopher, and he refuses to work anywhere that has an atmosphere that is not conducive to creative and liberating thinking. So we all sit in this beautiful, wonderful living room out there in Alice, as he won't go into offices. And we just processed and talked. And this animation that I'm showing you, every single scene and every single word was part of a co-design process that took a really long time. But I love it, and I hope you do too.
That mechanic was fixing my car real slow. I shouldn't have given him all that money. And that's the last bit of money I had. I've always got no money. I'm stupid doing that. I'm gonna be late now. My wife must be thinking what happened to me. She's on my back all the time.
You've been out all night. What happened?
I'm so stupid. I'm gonna be late now. What am I doing to myself?
You've been out all night. What happened? You've been out all night. What happened? I've been worried about you.
Come over here. I'm all right.
So, thank you, everybody. That I'm happy to open that up for questions now.
Thank you so much. That was a really interesting animation. I love the fact that it was all co-designed as well. Like, it makes such a difference when there's actual kind of collaboration and co-design involved in resources. I think it shows. I know that you've done a lot of work with parents who are struggling with substance use. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how substance use fits in with the PUP program, and whether there are any extra or different considerations as working with people who use substances and have problems with it.
A lot of the agencies that we work with are in the non-government sector. So in Queensland, if you think about places like Barnardo's, Mission Australia, Act for Kids, and often in the non-government sector, this holds for the UK as well, where we've done a lot of PUP work. There's an idea that if parents got substance misuse problems, they need to go and get that sorted, and then we'll do the parenting. It's a bit like the olden days when we used to say, if you've got depression and substance misuse, you have to go and get your mental health sorted, and then we'll sort out your substance use, which is kind of like, none of us think that these days. But so somehow what we need to do is move the field towards empowering and supporting the non-government sector to manage the substance misuse. In an ideal world, you have both agencies working alongside one another. But the reality is that that is not always possible or an option. So embedded in the PUP program, we have a module which is around identifying and managing substance use problems. And to varying degrees, agencies will take on that role of managing substance misuse problems. The ideal is, even if the parent wasn't engaged in treatment, that you make just enough traction that you can then bring in your drug and alcohol service. Ultimately, that's your ideal. But if that's not going to happen, helping the parent manage their own substance misuse is an option. Very out of control substance use is really difficult to manage. I think some of the cases where there is least success is probably where there's out of control methamphetamine use. Having said that, parents with the right support can be incredibly motivated to reduce their substance use if it's going to jeopardize their connection with their kids. So there's something about using their motivation to help their kids be the best that they can be, as a way of helping them think through and manage their substance misuse.
So kind of getting at the value there, maybe. Yeah, tapping into the motivation for the child. Yeah, awesome. So it's really clear that parental emotion regulation is key to kind of helping the whole family system unit. Are there any specific strategies that are used in PUP to help parents with this? Or is it more kind of opportunistic, as you say, using real life problems? Are there, yeah, I was wondering if there's anything in particular.
It's the reason it's an individualized approach is that you use your framework to develop a case formulation, if you like, and you work out which is where you're going to go in first. So if you've got a very hostile relationship, mum's totally over this 5-year-old, he's just a nasty little so-and-so, he's just like his dad, he's the source of all my problems, you would be working around how you change that hostile relationship. And in the process, she's overwhelmed. She's overwhelmed with a sense of desperation and a lack of control. So you're starting to build into her life some things that she does have some control over. So it may be very simple things like, let's get in touch with the teacher. It might be equally simple things like, you know, sleeping. Nobody's sleeping very regularly in this family, are they? And we know that sleep's really important. So why don't we all think about a bit of a family solution to this sleep situation? And what might that look like?
So kind of starting practically and getting the small wins first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. For many roles, so I'm kind of referring over here because this is where all the questions are. So when working in many roles, it can feel for a lot of workers as though time pressures kind of prevent much focus on working with the wider systems. I'm sure that I can see you smiling. I'm sure you've heard this before. I guess, what are your ideas about the small ways workers can kind of maybe modify their practice every day slightly to begin increasing this focus in the context of a busy work role?
Bring the kids into the room, either metaphorically or actually. Every single parent will have a photograph on their phone of their kids. Why not ask to see it? Do you have any photos of your kids? Oh, you do? Surprise. Oh, do you want to show them to me? How old are they? What's their names? James. Oh, James is 5. What are the things that you like most about James? And you're immediately bringing in to the conversation the child. And then in that process, it's like, well, you know, you're struggling with this methadone dose. And there's lots of other problems with James as well. But you've also just told me that you think he's a fantastic little boy and that you love him very much. How can we think about your managing whatever, you know, extra heroin on top, or, you know, increasing your methadone dose or whatever. How can we think about that as a way that is going to support you being the best mum you can be for James? So you can bring the child into the room in so many different ways, even in very traditional drug and alcohol settings.
Excellent, thank you. I just saw one over here. Has there been any research completed on using the PUP program for separated parents or where there's a step parent involved?
Oh, always. It's very rarely a little happy nuclear family there in the suburbs. There's always complex relationships. And again, you know, with new partnering, there's a whole discussion around role clarity. Who's doing what? How do you do that? We do have a module in the PUP program that looks at that. We also have a module that looks at what you deserve from a relationship. The other long-standing issue that people will be very aware of, and is actually quite well documented in the literature, is once that you have been in one domestically violent relationship, the chances of the next relationship being similar is very high. And so that's not to say that people bring it on themselves or anything like that, but there is something about understanding the patterns that you bring to relationships, and also claiming the right to have fair and loving and non-violent relationships. There's something about helping people claim that as their right. So yeah, there's, it is an area of considerable conflict. We're actually really interested in working with dads as well. We did this fabulous study in Scotland, and where we actually engaged dads who were involved on opioid replacement therapy. They had it all. These dads had been in the child protection system. They'd been in jail. They had been dealing. They were second, third generation, traumatized, unemployed Scotsmen. And the engagement in the program was really quite phenomenal, actually. We set out to engage 20 men, 25 signed up, 20 started, and at the end of the treatment program, 16 had stayed in, which really is quite phenomenal. And these were really tough guys. And there was something about them, the qualitative interviews that we did, that repeatedly it came out, this is the first time anybody's valued me as a dad. And so if you guys are thinking about, like, what can you do tomorrow that's different, you can say to one of the men that you're working with, what's it like being a dad? Tell me that story. And then you can start thinking about, whatever the role you're in, and how you want to manage that, and, thinking about the supervision context you're in, that can open up a whole range of different discussions about masculinity, about conflict management, about your experience as a youngster, about your experience when you were in jail, etc. That leads to, ultimately, how can you be a better dad?
It was interesting, as you were talking, I was wanting to ask kind of like, what do you think the key to engaging with these populations that have traditionally been seen as like difficult to engage? But from what you've just said, it sounds like it's really just about asking the question and having the conversation. Is that probably about it? I
think, Ben, there are very, very, very few people who don't truly love their kids in their heart of hearts, and life has got messy and complex. Sometimes kids have been removed for good reason, and sometimes kids are not returned for good reason, but that doesn't stop you from being a parent. You still are a mum, and there is something about how to manage and work with that particular situation that's as important as reunification or keeping kids with their parents.
Yeah. Amazing, thank you. Gillian says, this program walks nicely alongside our Circle of Security and Family Partnership. Has there been a comparison with these other programs?
No, we haven't done a head-to-head. I'm not very keen on head-to-head trials as a general rule, but what I can say is, if for anybody who's trained in Circle of Security, it fits really nicely with the PUP program and the Yellow Circle. So it's not unusual. So, for example, Kamara is one organisation where the staff are trained in Circle of Security, actually IUE as well, and they're trained in PUP. And it's a very compatible kind of model. You can run your Circle of Security groups quite comfortably. There's nothing that clashes theoretically or philosophically with the PUP program, but you also have in the PUP program a whole set of tools around parental emotion regulation, which you don't have in Circle of Security or Family Partnership.
Another really nice kind of comment. So we ran this program in the treatment facility I used to work for in the Gold Coast, and it was the most engaged program of everything we ran. So kind of engagement and sounds like meeting people kind of human to human is key, as you kind of mentioned just before. Have 5 minutes left. I was also keen to ask, you talked at the beginning about how this like children kind of can struggle in these situations, parents are struggling, and then also as workers kind of we can find it overwhelming as well. So to kind of turn the mirror back on ourselves, I was curious as to whether there's any kind of experience that you've gained from being so involved in the PUP program and people who are kind of learning this approach about how do we as the worker kind of stay emotionally regulated and be modeling all the things that we're hoping parents will do. Are there any thoughts that you have around that?
For me personally, the toughest is the situation where I think the child should be removed. And the help that I get from the structure of the PUP program is that I put the child center stage. And if you're putting the child center stage, which I think is a real challenge in adult services, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the intersection between adult services and child services. But the way I manage it personally, and I think is really key to helping others in the field, is to say what we want is the best for this child. And if that is not living in the home at this point in time, even if it is about a long-term guardianship order elsewhere, I think that is what helps me stay regulated and manage the complexity of the situations.
So really focusing on what we're working for is the benefit of the child and keeping that center stage sounds like a real key there.
That's a much more comfortable position for child-focused agencies.
Yeah.
I think it's more difficult, but still achievable in other agencies. I think you can, at least if you're balancing the needs of the child alongside the needs of your client, your adult client. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We're just almost coming up to 11 now, so I'll do the little wrap up, but it was a pleasure to listen to you and to have you along. Thank you for providing us with all this great information. So everybody as well in our audience, thank you for coming. We love to kind of hear from you. Please join us again next Wednesday at 10 a.m. There's going to be another webinar then on cannabis legalization and public health presented by Dr. Jani Leong. So enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. Thank you again, Sharon. Go well, and we'll see you next time.